Good morning, everyone. We are ready to start with the webinar today. Welcome to all our presenters and welcome to the audience with us. As you know, this is the second webinar from the Covenant webinar series on adaptation. Today we will focus on how to design an effective adaptation strategy and action plan. Earlier this year, in March, we launched the series with the first one on risks and vulnerability assessment, and I invite you to have a look at the Covenant of Mayors website and to watch the recording and the presentations from this webinar. Before I introduce our presenters for today, I would like to make a few housekeeping notes. The webinar will be recorded and you will be able to watch the on-demand recording on the Covenant of Mayors website. Also, we will share all the presentations and some additional information from the presenters on the Covenant of Mayors office, which you can use as a further reference document. We will be sharing this in email with all the registered participants shortly after the webinar. To ask questions, as already on the screen, you will be able to use the small chat window in the bottom right corner of your screens. I see you have been already typing in, so this is exactly the window for you to use and ask your questions. Please do so while listening to the presentations. In this way, we will be able to take up the questions immediately after, and we will also have some space to address questions at the very end of the webinar. So this is the window for the questions, and to continue with the presentations, the introductions of our speakers. To walk us through the process of designing an action plan on adaptation, we will have with us today Agate from Udalsarea, that's the Basque Network of Sustainable Municipalities. Her presentation will be followed by an introduction to a tool which is available for local authority to use and to choose from a number of adaptation options and actions. This will be presented by Peter Bosch. And finally, we will finish with the experience of the city of Lahti from Finland, and Eira Rosbiak will speak about their experience in participatory approaches and the process they are currently implementing in the city of Lahti. To start with a few introductory words about the Covenant, and we have already presented this in past webinars, and I'm sure you are aware that when signatories are committing to the 2030 targets of the Covenant, one of the pillars on adaptation is to strengthen the capacity to adapt and to climate change and to make cities more resilient. Within the Covenant framework, the different building blocks on adaptation are the risk and vulnerability assessment. As I noted earlier, the first webinar was focused on this topic, and there is a link to the recording you can easily access. Today we will focus on the other two building blocks, mainly the strategy and adaptation actions, including through what are the hazards addressed and the impacted sectors, and how to choose adaptation actions from and prioritize those. As another building block, the monitoring and evaluation will be tackled through the next series from the webinars later on this year. There is a tool that's available and openly accessible to local authorities to help them develop, implement, and monitoring their climate change action plans. We already presented this tool developed by the Covenant of Mayors Office and the European Environmental Agency. The Urban Adaptation Support Tool has been revised earlier this year, so it has been made even more relevant and useful. It has been tested and approved by covenant signatories, therefore the information is tailored and partitioned in different steps so that it's easy to locate which is the most relevant part and to read further information. Moreover, there are a number of useful references and guidance developed under various projects or reports which are referenced to each step, whereby you can find additional information. For example, for the topic of today on designing risks and vulnerability, these are the various steps you can see and browse through in the Urban Adaptation Support tool. For example, on identifying adaptation options, there is guidance contained on the catalog or how to find such examples, also on the assessment and selection of such options and how to prioritize them. As you can see, there are 4 particular sub-steps that you can browse through, as well as on the strategy and action plan and overall how to mainstream adaptation into urban policies and plans. It's just an overview, and you can click and expand on each of those sub-steps and read more, as well as have references to other useful materials. With this short introduction and without losing more time, I would like to pass the floor now to our first speaker, Agate, who will be presenting their experience in supporting municipalities in the Basque region on developing their adaptation plans through a number of tools and processes. And therefore, I give you the floor, Agate.
Hello, thank you very much, Petia. Good morning. Well, thank you very much for inviting us to present the work done by the Basque government regarding climate change, and well, I will focus particularly in adaptation. My name, I'm Agate Goyarrola, as you have said. I work in IOBE, and IOBE is the publicly owned company coming under the Basque government's Ministry for the Environment, Territorial Planning and Housing. And we support the Basque government in the implementation of the environmental policy. I work in the Department of Local Sustainability of IOBE, and well, with me is Carlos Castillo, that he works in the Climate Change Department. And well, I would also like to present, you can see them, but with us are also Iñaki García and José Ramón López from the Basque Energy Agency. Okay, well, first of all, 2 slides to present or to explain very briefly what is the context in the Basque Country. We have developed a long-term strategy that contemplates both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And the strategy was approved in 2015. And at the same time, its first action plan from 2015 to 2020 was launched. But what we would like to remark here is the vision of the strategy, because it focuses on having a consolidated climate change policy based in knowledge. It gives importance to innovation and to technological development to be seized, and also to the corresponsibility of all the stakeholders, and to having a leadership from the local from the administration and its exemplary action. Well, this on one hand, and on the other hand, in 2002, Udalsarea 21 network was created to support the implementation of Local Agenda 21s. Nowadays, we have changed the name to Udalsarea 2030, the Basque Network of Municipalities, of Sustainable Municipalities, because the reference is the 2030 Agenda. So this network promotes the local sustainability policies aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. The network today comprises of 186 municipalities, more or less the 75% of all the municipalities in the Basque Country, the 3 county councils, and the Basque government, different departments, ministries, not only environment, also health, and well, IOBE is the technical secretariat of this network. So we have more than 15 years of experience working in local sustainability in a coordinated way. Well, once you know which is the context, I am going to talk about how we support local adaptation. Here in this slide, you can see the ways we are supporting, in general, Basque municipalities to develop their sustainability policies in general. Okay, then I will specific one by one what are we doing in adaptation. But the first important aspect or way is the coordination of the public administration, promotion of the coordination between the different ministries and also the different levels of the administration, regional, territorial, and local. Boost the elaboration of local strategies and plans, but with an integral approach. We try always to showcase the work done already by the municipalities, different themes like mobility, energy, biodiversity, and see what are the aspects that are not being addressed. So it will come the third one, that is generate knowledge and information at regional and local level about these new files that must be addressed. And the fourth one will be the development of common tools and methodologies that we always try to do also in a collaborative way, tested with municipalities, and whenever it's necessary also to make them compatible with European and or international platforms. And then backing local action through grants or subsidies that from the given by the Environmental Ministry of the Basque Government, also supporting the local innovation, both as an economic support and also technical support. And the last thing we would like to remark is that we respect also the local autonomy because we contemplate the possibility of establishing local strategies and plans from different starting points. Okay, so all this support, we give it in the framework of UDAS Area 2030 platform. And now I'm going to explain what are we doing in each of these aspects, but regarding adaptation. Okay. Well, in the coordination of public administration, just to show you this slide, as I mentioned before, all the support given is given in the framework of the network, and specifically in climate change issues, there has been a coordination between IOBE and the Basque Energy Agency since the beginning. And now we are happy to announce that in the following days, IOBE is going to become an official supporter of the Covenant of Mayors in Basque Country for adaptation issues. And we will do this in coordination with the Basque Energy Agency, that is a coordinator of the Covenant of Mayors since 2009 for mitigation issues. So this is a good example of how two ministries, different ministries, are coordinated to support two municipalities, in this case, in climate change. Okay, well, when we talk about the integral approach to climate change, it's because, as I mentioned, UDAS Area 2030 network aims or supports the elaboration of local 2030 agendas. So everything we address, like climate change, we always do it from an integral approach. We start working in 2005 in climate change, and the way we are carrying out in adaptation is the same one that we carried out in mitigation. First of all, analyze the local sustainability policies in force, what is being carried on, and how it contributes to climate change. Identify the new aspects the municipalities have to address, and develop tools and supporting instruments for addressing them. For example, in 2005 was developed the tool for calculation of GHG emissions that has been updated due to meet requirements demanded in different initiatives like the Covenant of Mayors. Once it was developed, we included it in the indicator system of Udalsarea 2030, facilitating in this way the annual calculation of the inventory of the GHG emissions to all of the members of the network. And well, regarding adaptation, we started working on that in 2011 with the publication of a guide to define municipal programs to adapt to climate change and a manual of urban planning in the Basque Country for mitigation and adaptation. Well, all this work permitted to 10 Basque municipalities being compliant of the initiative Global Compact of Mayors in 2015. And this initiative promotes from the beginning an integral approach of climate change with mitigation and adaptation, as now does the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So, well, this is another also example of what we wanted to present. Then, two brief slides about the knowledge, just to know that there are, in a regional level, regionalized scenarios in Euskadi of high resolution scenario for 1 kilometer per 1 kilometer, and that in last year we did the vulnerability and risk assessment of Basque municipalities based in these regional climate change scenarios and in all the information gathered through the local sustainability indicator system of Udalsarea 2030. So there have been analyzed 4 types of impact change: heat waves, drought, sea level flooding, and river flooding, and also 2 RCP and 3 baseline periods. Well, with all this information, to give each municipality in the Basque Country the personalized local indicators used in the vulnerability and risk assessment and the aggregated indices obtained, these data have been transferred to a set of individual city profiles for each of the 251 municipalities. A summary sheet have been created in Excel format. This is an important tool as they can obtain information of their own municipality, and this is very important to start to define a municipal adaptation plan. Here you can see an example of Asparrena, that the city of Asparrena has a high vulnerability and a medium risk in fluvial flooding in urban areas, because all this information is standardized and you can compare yourself with respect to the surrounding municipalities and with respect to the average, average of the municipalities of the Basque Country. You know that in adaptation it happens that the municipalities have of your environment, even if they are close to yours, can have very different problems. So because it's a very, very localized issue. So, well, another aspect we would like to remark are the nature-based solutions. These are soft solutions with a lot of co-benefits, social, economic, in biodiversity. And in 2017, we published a methodological guide for the identification and mapping of natural solutions by the municipalities. In short, it aims to guide municipality in the process to 1. Identify their current adaptation potential, considering in any case the available resources, and 2. Start their path towards adaptation. For each natural solution identified, the analysis is made to threaten and what benefits it brings. So the nature-based solutions have been characterized according to 3 criteria: the climate threat to which the measures respond, the co-benefits that the nature-based solutions provide from the economic, social, and environmental perspectives, and according to the criteria that condition the feasibility for their implementation. The nature-based solutions also have been classified according to the scale or scope of the intervention at 6 levels. First one, the building, actions on rooftops, facades and community spaces of the buildings, public spaces, actions in public living areas, urban parks and other urban features of the public space. 3, the water bodies and drainage systems. 4, the linear transport infrastructures, nurturing actions for both high capacity like roads or railways and streets. The 5, the natural areas and management of rural land, actions to conserve and restore natural ecosystems and managing the rural land. And 6, the coastline, the coast. So, well, accompanying the guide, there is an annex that includes fact sheets for each of the nature-based solutions identified. And it also includes a pilot study, the nature-based solutions map of the city of Donostia San Sebastián, that was developed in the context of its local climate change adaptation plan. And, well, finally, the latest tool we have developed between last year and this one is a tool called eAdapta, which is useful both for municipalities that have an adaptation plan and for those that, even if they do not have a specific plan, are implementing actions in the sphere of adaptation. We think it's necessary to provide the municipalities with tools for the management of the climate change adaptation policies, and that these tools are aligned with the model of evaluation and monitoring of local sustainability policies. So eAdapta integrates the vulnerability and risk assessment of the municipalities mentioned before and provides key information aimed at different types of decision-making, policies, planning, execution. It allows transparency and accountability of an emerging file that is quite difficult to get across to the citizens, to the political staff, and it facilitates the monitoring reporting process for municipalities signed up to the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And, well, just to mention brief, other publications that could be of interest, there are some publications about good practices in nature-based solutions and climate change and adaptation practices. Some of them are available in English. We also have a practical guide for analyzing the impact on health of local urban planning initiatives, and this is in English also. And a last publication to mention is one that gives a comparative study of the local environmental taxation instrument. But, well, this is only in Spanish. Well, so I am going very fast, sorry, but, well, it's just to have time to mention all the ways we are supporting. The next one will be the grants for local adaptation. Grants complement the rest of tools available, the vulnerability and risk assessment, the methodological guides, the implementation of nature solutions, eAdapta, best practices. And the Ministry of Environment, Territorial Planning and Housing gives subsidies for the elaboration of local adaptation plans, because there is a line for financing action on climate change since 2007, which gives aids for 650,000 euros per year, and since 2014 this line includes subsidies for local adaptation plans. The first 2 years nobody or just one municipality applied for this grant, but nowadays several municipalities have local adaptation plans. And now there are subsidies for measures that are registered in local adaptation plans in this line. So, well, and finishing about innovation in local adaptation, There is, well, a lot of uncertainty, you know, in climate change, so we think it's important to support innovation. There are two announcements in the regional level that are called, well, one is an innovative procurement announcement, and another one is comes from the Science, Technology and Innovation Plan of the Basque Country. And even if they are in a regional level, both of them have been developed. In both of them have been developed projects that have generated tools and knowledge at the local level. For example, the inclusion of adaptation in planning instruments and in the urban renewal processes, in energy infrastructures, impact of heat waves on health in climate change scenarios, vulnerability of the Natura 2000 network to climate change. Well, and then in Udalsarea 2030 network, there is a program, a specific program that every year finances projects related to climate change. And in the last 3 editions, we have put emphasis in financing projects based on nature solutions from a perspective of climate change adaptation. Obviously, we promote the use of the tools and methodologies developed in Udalsarea 2030 in the innovative projects we finance. So here are some examples of projects that are now being carried out, and we think and it will provide of new examples and best practices of measures referred in the Natural Solutions Guide. Well, I just have another last slide to say which are our next steps. First one is the coordinate the transition from CAPs to CCAPs with the Basque Energy Agency. Continue with the risk assessment, runoff, wind, fires. Have a good online platform with all the information available. That is called Climate Portal. Climate Portal. Continue with the dissemination. Continue also developing demonstration project. Analyze the effect of sea flooding, sea level flooding, because 70% of the population in the Basque Country lives in the coastal municipalities. Promote the training of all the stakeholders, and search for funding. We are now waiting to have the confirmation if we can go ahead with a project we present to the ALIVE, an integral project called Climate 2050, and that proposes the deployment of the Basque Country strategy in the urban area. So, well, we will continue looking for European funds, and we are pleased to receive proposals from others. So, well, I finish with this, just to know that there are some 3 or 4 slides more that talks about, present some other examples of municipalities that have the action plan in adaptation, and, well, how are different depending on how they have done it, and just if you want to consult them, you have there.
Thank you very much, Agate, for this extensive introduction on how you are supporting cities in the Basque Country. We have one question from, actually a few more questions coming. The first one from Birgit, and she's asking about the practical experience in specific cities on how the tools are applied. And as you mentioned, you have a few case studies, so maybe these studies could serve to let us know a few examples of how the tools were applied in cities.
Yes, I have said, as I said, there are 12 municipalities that already have their local adaptation plan. All of them, well, they ask every when a municipality wants to do a plan on adaptation, we give them their city profile with all the results of the risk and vulnerability assessment of of the municipality, and then what we wanted to say with the flexibility is that, for example, some municipalities have done their first of all they have done a SIAP, and then they have developed an adaptation plan. Others like Donostia city, San Sebastian city, they have done a strategy on climate change to 2050, aligned with the regional strategy, the Basque Country's strategy. So they already have a SECAP. And we have also other examples of like Renteria city, that she has for one aspect a SIAP, and from another hand an adaptation plan. So now they are going to have to do a SICAP, and we are how do you say, aprendiendo, learning in this way of in this way we are learning. What we have very clear is that the municipalities must have their vulnerability and risk assessment, and then they must focus on what in the impact change that affect to the municipality more. It's some municipalities also have analyzed sectors, vulnerable sectors, like very old people, for example, and because the priorities for each municipality is given by this assessment, and so they start doing their their actions, or defining their actions based on this.
Response, Agate, and we have a few more questions coming. So you have provided us a list of links to the various resources and tools that you have that you presented. So we will be sharing this, and I think this answers the questions of Rosario was asking about the publications with access. So we will share those links in the follow-up information package. Also, Per from the city of Umea is asking about the screenshots in Spanish that you showed in your presentation and whether it's possible to have them in English. I assume it is a bit difficult, but maybe we could put you both in touch in order to discuss which exactly are the slides and the information, if this is fine. Thank you. And
yes, sure.
also, Maudud is asking about the tools and methodologies used for the vulnerability assessment. As I said, we will be sharing quite a few links on risks and vulnerability assessment documents that you have prepared, including the guidance you presented. So maybe this would suffice, and we can come back to this question later on after all the presenters have gone through their presentation.
Okay, just to say, Petya, that there are quite a lot of the references, the links that you will send, no, that I have sent to you, that are in English. So some of them no, but for example, the guide of the vulnerability and risk assessment is in English. The nature-based solutions guide is in English, and well, there are some publications in English, so could be of interest.
Yes, I'm sure of this, and we will be including all of this in the follow-up package. Again, thank you so much, Agate, and I will now pass the floor to our next speaker, Peter Bosch, who will be presenting the Library of Adaptation Options. This is an online tool which is openly accessible, and he will guide us through a live demonstration. So I'm passing on the floor to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you. I'll share my screen with you because what you will get is a live demonstration of this tool. First, introduce myself. I have been coordinating a EU-sponsored research project called RAISIN, where we developed a number of tools to support cities in Europe to create adaptation strategies. And one of those tools was a database of adaptation measures. We called it the Library of Adaptation Options. And it answers hopefully questions of cities working on adaptation. Essentially, and that's what you see on your screen right now, is a database of two parts. One we call the quick access part, which is a kind of normal database where you get a list of adaptation options. Behind it is a complete database of about 300 literature sources that we've used to gather information on effectiveness and costs of the adaptation options. I will show you in due time how it works. Let's move on to the quick access part. This is how it looks like. Here on the left side you see a number of filters which help you select the adaptation options. The center part is a listing of adaptation options. You can do a search on words, of course. And interesting to show is that there are some classifications, and I can, if I move it around, you can see that every measure is more or less qualified in good, bad, or ugly with regards to effectiveness for heat, effectiveness for flooding, and cost effectiveness. I'll come back to that later. Let's first see how it works. One of the questions that cities and municipalities often have when creating an adaptation strategy is, how do I get an overview of adaptation options? How do I select them? What are the best adaptation options for my city or my district? How effective are these in my circumstances? Well, the adaptation option library is designed to answer those questions. Let's just take an example. You're in the stage of writing an adaptation strategy with various chapters. Some adaptation strategies have chapters on, say, city center, the harbor. Others, they organize it more like the climate threats that are coming. Let's, for this example, assume that you have a strategy that's organized in chapters on what to do with the warming up of our city, what to do with flooding in our city. And in each chapter, you would like to have a kind of listing of adaptation options that would be applicable for the various stakeholders, including other departments in the municipality. So what we do, we look at climate hazards, and as I said, let's take a chapter on heat waves. I mark box heat waves, and then you can see that here at the top, we've now selected 44 out of 100 measures that are applicable for heat waves, which is still quite a lot. And if I go down to them, they are a mix. There are also regulation and awareness raising things together with the more technical things like a cool facade. So we would like to select only for our listing those measures that are more technical, say the blue-green ecosystem-based adaptation measures, the gray engineered measures, and maybe some technological, very technical measures. which gives a list of 29 of those measures. Still quite a lot. But you can go through each of the measures, and if you click on them, for instance, clicking on here exterior shading devices or blinds, when you click on a measure, a explanation pops up with a description of the measure, a kind of qualitative description of some co-benefits. Very interesting is also a section where there is a listing of technical standards for the design of the adaptation measure. And if I go down, there is also a summary of what is the heat effectiveness. And it is expressed here in a number of variables that have a lot to do with the interior side of the building, like indoor air temperature or energy savings. And yeah, you get a number of figures, say a cooling load reduction of on average 17% by applying blinds. And if you want to know where this is coming from, you have to go to the complete database, and that's when I push this button here. Then I move to another part of the library, which is the complete database that shows the literature sources where the information is coming from. You find the full references, and if I click on heat effectiveness here, you see various results taken from those studies on the cooling, payback period, energy savings, indoor temperature of the various experiments that have been taken in literature. Going back to the library again, you can have a look at the various measures. Yeah, you can think of, okay, which would be the ones that would be relevant for my city. And for instance, you say, okay, cool facades could be interesting. And I mark this with by clicking the star here. Cool pavement would be interesting, cool roofs, grass. And so you can, from a longer list of adaptation options, you can create your own list. And with this button to the left, favorite options only, you can select only those that you have identified as being very suited. And with the button at the bottom, export, you can easily create an Excel comma-separated file. Oops, that's other work. Comma-separated file that you can process later on and create your listings of. So that's one example. I'm resetting it now and show you another example of how it could be used. Assuming that you're working in a specific area of the city, it's a bit out the outside of the city, an area with small-scale businesses, medium-sized. There are some major roads, and the area is prone to flooding of a small river. The question is, what are the adaptation options? In this case, again, we can select from the climate hazards. Now, fluvial flooding. We can select of the measured targets some characteristics of the area, its buildings, I said its infrastructures. There could be more, but we leave it just like this. And then we see we have 20 out of the 100 adaptation options, ranging from amphibic houses, building regulation. Maybe we should also go for, say, the more technical measures, taking out the regulation and education measures, leaving 18 measures at the end, which is still a considerable list, but you can sort the list. At the bottom there is a button to sort the list, and I can sort the list on, say, flood effectiveness. And then you see a number of options coming up, like dry proofing, which is preventing houses to come into a high water channel, which is scored bad on costs, which is logical because that's quite an expensive option to do, and you need the space. Surface water storage, wet proofing, and if I go down the list, you're coming to compartmentalization and the various types of barriers and containers and dams to prevent flooding, which might need some further study to see what would be the most suited solution for specifically your area. And again, as I said, using the stars, I can create a list of my favorite options only as a short listing for this area. Well, this is more or less my presentation. You find the link in the invitation to this webinar, but also in the material that will be distributed after the webinar. And of course, there are issues which have to do with the classification in very good and good, the translation from literature into the effectiveness scores and some classification problems. But to my knowledge, this is a rather comprehensive overview of adaptation options for cities in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. It was very comprehensive, and it's very useful to have these hands-on demonstrations through the tool. There are some questions coming. In the meantime, can you share a little bit of the feedback and experience of cities who have already used the tool, and how it has been helpful, or some tips towards other cities who could avail of this tool?
We have, in our project, we had a number of cities that have experimented with the tool, among others Paris, Bratislava. Bratislava specifically used also the tool in its early stages to create lists of adaptation options for reporting to the Covenant of Mayors. And they had an adaptation action plan with a lot of actions, but they used the library to make it far more specific. Bratislava also translated the full database in the Slovak language, by the way, because they were so enthusiastic about it that they wanted to share it with their contractors and the local units within their city, say subunits within the city. In Paris, the database has been used in a project, say a restructuring project of a neighborhood, but the experiences were a bit mixed in the sense that we tried it on the very level of technical people, and they had some difficulties working with such a full overview of all kinds of adaptation options, and would like to have it far more dedicated.
Thank you, and I can see a lot of very encouraging and comments coming, that it's really operational and very easy to use. But Leah is asking whether there would be more measures added to the library in the future.
As it is, we were a Horizon 2020 research project, and when it's finished, it's finished. but we hope that we will be able to maintain and also still improve the library in the future. So maybe is the answer.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. If more questions are coming, we will have still some time to address them at the end of the webinar. And once again, Peter has kindly provided additional slides, because here we run a live demo. In the package we will share, there will be also some slides which would remind you about these different possibilities of the tool. Without further ado, I'm now passing on the floor to our third presenters, Eera Rosberg from the city of Lahti in Finland, who will present their experience in designing an adaptation action plan. Eera, up to you.
Hello, thank you. So I am Sustainable Development Coordinator from City of Lahti. And my role here is to tell quite a hands-on example how we have done adaptation strategy and action plan here in Lahti. Okay, if I can change the slide. Okay.
You can change the slide.
Yeah, it's a little difficult with this. Well, here is a map where Lahti is located. We are in quite northern city, even we are in southern Finland, not very far from our capital Helsinki and, for example, St. Petersburg. And in our city strategy, we want to be a bold and environmental city, and with very ambitious carbon neutrality goal 2025. Okay, I can't change it. Also, in our city strategy from last year, we speak out loud that we want to participate our citizens, and not only forming the strategy, but all programs, and not only land use plans and land use related issues, but all programs. The climate targets are one of our main strategy measures, and we are aiming, or we already know that our emissions will go down remarkably next year, and it is estimated to be over -70% in 2021. So, but here is hands-on process, or I can show you how we have done this adaptation plan and climate change mitigation action plan. If you look at the first year clock, 2018, and what happened before that, how we got started. Of course, the main driver was joining again CCAP, or continuing from CIAP to CCAP. And 2017, our decision makers made that decision that we will continue to CCAP, and there was no any problem or hassle in it. And our retiring mayor signed the paper in beginning of 2018. I think that is marked there in March. However, also how we got started, we understood we need adaptation plan or adaptation strategy, which we didn't have before. We have had different kinds of risk assessments and like that already 2012, but we never really made it to a program we started to do the actions, but in city strategy level or program level we didn't have it. And then also Lahti became a follower city in this Resilient Cities project that Peter earlier mentioned. So I started to have conversations with our land use people, master planning people, and our security manager. And the work in the resin project started. So there we had this group of people that were already doing adaptation measures or already doing, but then we formalized those people as an adaptation group or climate group. So 2018, the real formulation of this program and CCAP started. And we used Ivavia tool for the risk and vulnerabilities assessment, and that was we had quite many citizen evenings, and we used both maps that people could point, for example, areas that are exposed to flooding, for example, and we use this Ivavia tool, which is not so much hands-on, doesn't work perfectly with random people, like in citizen evening, where people don't have very much time to concentrate on that tool. However, in June 2018, we had a stakeholders workshop. And to that workshop, we invited a wide range of stakeholders, of course from city organization, but very much from other businesses and healthcare units and fire department and different kinds of stakeholders that operate in Lahti region. And they came, and we had very good workshop with this Ivavia tool, where these climate effects were recognized, but the Ivavia tool is clever in that way that we don't concentrate on the effects, but we concentrate on how we could lessen our vulnerabilities. So it's quite rewarding in workshop where you can have tables and like a table keeper or facilitator who can guide the discussion, because people like to talk like climate change effects, but we want to go beyond that and not just concentrate on different effects, but how we can lessen our risks and vulnerabilities. And also prioritizing what they thought are the main threats and or the main climate phenomena that we should concentrate. And overall warming and overall increase of precipitation were chosen. Because our climate here up north is warming twice as fast as globally. So we already have 2 degrees warmer climate now than we used to have in beginning of 1960s. So this is not a scenario, this is measured climate data. Okay, but about this process. Then in October we had management team prioritizing workshop where this mayor and city management team chose the group of measures they think we must concentrate in our actions. Like in only couple of years time, what our time period of couple of years, which are the most important. So increasing urban green and increasing increasing nature habitats in city were chosen. And then 2019, all these different already existing actions, I and our climate group, we collected from different programs and plans, like from our master plan and sustainable urban mobility plan and our environmental program and our energy efficiency agreement. And so we didn't make up all actions, but we collected existing climate-related actions, both mitigation and adaptation actions. And of course we have suggestions what actions we need more, but in this first stage we have actions that already are in all different kinds of programs and plans. So in May and June this year, this program or this strategy and risk assessments and action plan, all the measures were presented to city board, actually twice, and then it went to decision making. So now, beginning of June, we have this CCAP that is already approved in our city board. Okay. So some interesting parts of this process I want to raise. We did it that way that we integrated all existing plans and programs, and in that our climate working group was very useful, and then maybe and hopefully we didn't forget anything that is already going on, which is important. Also the question how to involve all the necessary sectors, not only environmental and technical sectors. This is very important. And here in Lahti, one important person is our security manager, who understood very well why climate change is important, and also that if we can mitigate, then less we have to be prepared for the most dangerous effects. And this is picture of already ongoing actions. We were collecting these actions from existing programs because we have already been doing these actions for many years, but we just haven't had any this integrating program or plan for it. But one example is this stormwater flooding that we just got new survey last year or beginning of this year. So we have this GIS information now. Okay. Secondly, we did adaptation and mitigation action plan together. They are in the same program. And that is maybe the root for it is in our city strategy, because we want to mitigate as much as possible, and we are very ambitious in that way. So more we can mitigate the climate change, less we have to adapt. And if everybody could do this, then it might work. But also because there are some co-benefits that some measures like increasing the urban green and increasing amount of trees, they are both mitigation and adaptation measures. They serve both. Okay. Thirdly, we had quite many participatory citizen afternoons, and this wide stakeholder workshop, and it had also iteration round. And this stakeholder group had about 150 participants. So it's when they were almost all very active, so it was a good active group. We had one open climate lecture, and we had open commentary in the internet. And how we did the citizen participation. Most of the evenings were or afternoons were organized with land use planners. So actually I just went in, like when I know that they are going to have all the time different kinds of citizen participation related to their master planning process or work in villages, because we have some rural areas here in Lahti as well. So I just said, okay, we are going to have a climate change table there as well. So in that way we reached far more people than if we had organized only climate change participation afternoons. And the stakeholder workshop was very important part, and also the iteration round. And there the first prioritizing were made. Okay, and this is just a picture of one map exercise that was done in those evenings, participational evenings. So people could mark spots in their neighborhood. And this is picture of of the stakeholder workshop, and there's this Evavia table with post-it stickers where they are thinking what measures we should be taking. And fourth interesting issue we had was this mayors and managers prioritizing workshop, and there I printed money, so we used fake money, and they could stick these imaginary paper money bills to different actions. So we worked from very concrete level, already those actions that could lessen our vulnerability. Of course, this kind of involving managers and mayors, it doesn't guarantee the financing, but they have already allocated imaginary money to some actions. So maybe that will help them later when they have to allocate the real money. So at the moment, we have adaptation and mitigation actions in same table, and every action has the responsible unit or team or the Lahti Group company written who is the responsible unit. And also the possible effectiveness is marked. Also, those prioritized adaptation measures are marked. And if the action is both mitigation and adaptation, it is marked. So this way, we would like to see that we will still have a future as a winter sports town, and we want to keep our winters white. Of course, Petja wanted to hear some challenges. Everything didn't go always very smoothly, and this is one I already mentioned. In the citizen participation, but also with stakeholders, also with managers. People like talking climate change in general, or the effects it might have in their life, or what they have heard what kind of effects it will have in some other parts of the world. But we would like to hear or think more what are the effects here locally, and most of all, what are the actions that could make us less vulnerability locally here. So guiding the discussion to that direction is one challenge. And then this Evavia tool, it was very good in stakeholder workshop, and as a tool for me when I was organizing these tables and these measures. But as a participatory tool, it's not very handy. It needs a structured and facilitated workshop. And even some politicians wanted to have workshops already a year ago, and then again last winter. Then we couldn't have when I approached every party and the leader of the local party in the city council, that when could we have a small workshop in your group meeting, for example, they didn't have time. And then we ended up that we just asked all the politicians to join the lecture, the overall open lecture. That was also for our city employers. We also invited city employers to that, but only few politicians then came. So in May this year, when this started to approach the decision-making phase, then they needed these presentations, and then we had to make 2 presentations in their meetings. So even we wanted to participate the politicians in a much earlier phase. It didn't work out. So, well, good thing is that even they were not perfectly participants in this process, then they accepted the plan. Okay. Thank you, and maybe some questions. And there is this funny, no, not funny, but very interesting small video about greenlahti.fi/en, and the en is not showing very well here, but there is some visualization from Lahti.
Great. Thank you so much, Eera, for sharing your experiences. And indeed, you showed us some very practical, hands-on approaches, also non-conventional, with printed money and meetings. You mentioned on a few occasions the Ibavia tool, which you have used to facilitate your planning and design of action plan. It is part of the resin project. We did not focus today on it because there is another webinar already presented in the past, but we will share information on the tool that you have used, plus the link to the recording of the webinar, so that for those interested, they can have this material as a reference. And other than this side note, one question to follow up your presentation. You described the many local stakeholder meetings that you have had, and that it was a challenge to make people think about local solutions that make difference to them. What were the ways to drive people towards thinking along these lines and to give you ideas?
Yeah, the table facilitator needed to remind people that we should concentrate on these local effects and local, and these not relational effects, but straight effects. So it needed this table facilitator, and in citizen afternoons, in the same way, there should be a person reminding that even talking about climate change is, of course, interesting, but it could just go on without any concrete, we want some concrete fruits from the discussion.
Indeed, and you rightly pointed out that we asked also to share the challenges, because we usually share good practices and lessons learned, what worked well. But it is true that along the way we always come across challenges, bigger or smaller, and how we overcome them is also important. So thank you very much for sharing also some of the more challenging solutions. I do not see any more questions coming up from our audience. I hope they are still with us and could kindly.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Hello, can you hear me? I think we've lost the sound for a little bit, but yeah, we are back on track. Apologies for this small technical glitch. And let me see if we have some questions. No, before maybe losing sound, I just invited the audience to have their, yep, we have the sound, fine. Apologies for this. We asked for some more questions to come to our three speakers, but as there were none, I did ask Ira to indicate whether they are planning in the city of Lahti to have more participatory approaches applied for the implementations of actions, now that this has worked well for the planning.
This will continue, especially as a part of master planning process, but also we are starting new actions. Of course, many of the actions are already going on, but if we want to start get going with the new ones, so we cannot do that alone. Many of those are related to private people or households or small companies.
Okay, thanks very much. And there was another question for Agate from the previous session, immediately after her presentation. Could you tell us a little bit more about the approach and the tools you are using for the risks and vulnerability assessment? We did have a webinar on risks and vulnerabilities in March, but this seems to be a very interesting topic, and it's recurring, so maybe you can share a little bit of your approach and what support you're providing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this came a little bit of a surprise question to Agatha and her colleague.
Yeah. Yes, Petia, I will give let my colleague, Carlos, who is going to tell you something more about the assessment.
Wonderful,
okay?
Thank you, and thanks to Carlos for joining in.
Hello, good morning. Well, all I have to say is that we have followed the IPPC methodology, and we have calculated the exposition, the adaptive capacity, sensibility, and the risk. So we have a map for each of those variables, and one map for each impact. So the calculation is very complex with the variables we have or the indicators we have chosen for each impact, starting with scenarios, economic indicators, social indicators, and you have the whole methodology in our guide, and it is in English, so I think you will be able to
Wonderful.
to
Thank you very
understand
much,
it.
Carlos. Indeed, we will be sharing all this, and if there are some questions, then they could be addressed maybe bilaterally. There is a question coming in from Mario addressed to Eira. How many internal or City of Lahti staff units are following the process? Eira?
In our working group, we have less than 10 people. There was a little some changes, and more people wanted to join, but I think we are 8. But then in the process, it was much more, and I have reached people from all different units in our city organization, but also our group companies, because we don't own, for example, our water department, but it's its own water company, but it's in close relationship with us and also this work.
Okay, thank you very much, Eira. And in the meantime, as I don't see many more questions coming up, and we are almost running ahead of time for the planned finish of this webinar, I would like to first thank very much our presenters for all the effort and walking us through the process of planning and supporting others to develop adaptation action plans. Also, sincere thanks to our audience for their questions, and apologies for the slight technical glitch at the very end of the webinar. As mentioned, we have been conducting this series of webinars within the Covenant on Adaptation, and in this slide you can see the future webinars coming on from the series, but also the past ones. It's more or less interactive, whereby you can click on the different boxes and access the recording or the useful information that is produced after webinars. Therefore, please check out previous recordings, and we will be sharing this in the info package. To stay tuned for future webinars, to follow our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, also our website, and I will use the liberty to approach all of you who have been part of today's webinar and invite you to the next adaptation webinar series. In the meantime, should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact the Covenant of Mayors office. We are always happy to address your questions, whatever nature they are. And again, there are the thanks only. I'm just looking for some questions. I think it's a good point to end our webinar, and many thanks again to our presenters and most of you, to the audience, for staying with us in the past 1 hour and a half. Good afternoon to everyone.